Hi YouTube, Ben from Sonic Safari here. In this multi-part tutorial, we're going to get our hands dirty, we're going to do some sound design. Specifically, we're going to design some drum sounds from scratch using nothing but synthesizers. In fact, I'm going to apply some limitations here. I'm just going to use the ES2 synthesizer from Logic, and I'll just use stock plugins from Logic. So all you Logic Pro users can follow along if you want. I'll also make the project and the files available for a download. Eventually, we're going to build a whole drum kit, and we're even going to put it into a sampler. So I'll give the sample patch available as a download if you just want to play the sounds. So let's get into it. Okay, in this first part, we're going to start off with a kick drum. So here I am in Logic. I've already got the ES2 synthesizer loaded up here, and I'm actually going to start from a default patch because, well, the user default sounds like this. So if yours doesn't sound the same, let's start from the tutorial settings. I'm going to come to the presets, tutorial settings, and I'm actually going to choose this one here, analog saw initial. So it should sound like this. So what we've got here is just a single oscillator. Notice that oscillators 2 and 3 are turned off at the moment, and we're just hearing oscillator 1. The filter cutoff is turned all the way up, so we're not hearing any filtering going on, and it's pretty much just an initial patch. It's a good starting point. So with a kick drum, it's usually good to start with a fairly simple tone, and I'm going to start off with a sine wave. So here in oscillator 1, I'm going to switch this to a sine wave, and here we can hear just a simple sine. Now I should say for this tutorial, you may need to have decent sized speakers or have some headphones because we're going to be dealing with some sub bass, and you're just not going to hear that on laptop speakers or, small speakers. So you might want to don some headphones. All right. So of course, one of the things about a kick drum is it's generally pretty low frequency. The fundamental frequency is usually somewhere around 100 hertz. So, we can tune that, but what I'll do for a start is I'm playing C2 here, and I'm going to set the oscillator pitch down to negative 12 dB. We'll start here and, see how that sounds. That should give us a fundamental tone. If I open up the EQ here, somewhere around about 75. In fact, we could possibly bring this up a semitone or two. So now that's, let's see. I'm going to go negative 5. This may change, all right? So that gives us the fundamental frequency pretty much here at about 100 hertz, as we can see in the EQ. I'll close that for now. All right, cool. Now, a big part of getting a sort of kick drum sound, it's all to do with the envelopes. And, a big part that gives it the punch is a sort of pitch envelope. So at the start of the sound pitches down very quickly, and it gives it a kind of bit of a punch at the start. So let's check that out. I'm going to come down to the mod matrix down here in the middle, and I've already got a target here that's set to pitch 1, 2, 3. Now I could just choose pitch 1, but I'll leave it on pitch 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to choose the source instead of the LFO. I'm going to choose envelope 1. So envelope 3, I believe, is already routed to the volume. So I'm going to use envelope 1. It's not really being used here. I don't want this controlled via the mod wheel, so I'll set the via to off. And now I've got the amount, which is this green slider here. So I'll increase this, and you'll hear envelope 1 now controlling the pitch. And already you can start to hear that sort of pitch down sound. And it almost sounds a little bit like an 808 kick drum, which is kind of what we're going for here. Now, that is quite a long pitch down. So if I look at envelope 1 here, the main thing we want to do is play with the decay here. This is a fairly simple envelope, which is why I've picked it. Now, I want to probably leave the attack all the way down, although we'll maybe try and get rid of a click in a moment. But let's look at the decay. So somewhere around about 40, 50 milliseconds here is sounding pretty good. Also, you'll need to play with the amount here. So it's a balancing act between these main controls. So I'm going to crank that up somewhere around 80 or 90 or so. And you can hear we're starting to sound a little bit like a kick drum. Now, let's turn our attention to the volume envelope, because if I hold the note down, you'll hear that the sound just keeps playing. All right, we don't want that. We want this to, basically the sound to just play once and stop playing. So the main thing I want to do here is come to the sustain. The sustain is the volume at which the note will sustain as you hold your finger down on a note. So if I bring the sustain volume all the way down, what that means is it's going to sound when I hit a note, and the attack is basically how long it takes for the initial volume to come to the maximum peak. I'm actually going to leave that attack all the way down so straight away we hear that sound. The decay is how long it takes to die out. And in this case, even if I hold the note down, because I've got the sustain turned down, the sound will actually stop. So let's have a listen. Okay, I'm still holding my finger down, and you can hear that the sound stopped. So I'm going to play with the decay here again. In this case, it's affecting the volume envelope, not the pitch. So let's have a listen. Okay, somewhere around there is okay for a start. Now you could also play with the release. So the release is when I let go of the note, how long that takes to die out. So we don't want it to cut off straight away. So somewhere between 100 to 300, I'm going to go somewhere around 200 milliseconds. It's starting to sound okay. Now with this sort of thing, it's a monophonic sound, meaning that you would not play chords with this type of sound. Let's hear what this sounds like if I try and play chords. Not really like a kick drum. So what I want to do is come up the top here, and I'll change the voicing to a mono voicing, which means you can only really play one note at a time. So there we go. And in fact, also I'll come here to the oscillator start. Now this is a function you might not find on other synthesizers, but the ES2 is quite flexible. Notice that the oscillator start is set to free running, which means that in most analog synthesizers, the oscillator is just continuously running. So it's just making a sound, and we only open up that sound when we play a note, when we open up a gate. So when you actually trigger a sound, it might be not necessarily at the start of the phase of the oscillator, it might be somewhere in the middle, and it will always be changing. And what that means is that can be nice for a more analog-y sound, but you'll lose a lot of punch in the transients. And the transient's the very start of the sound. So we want a really punchy sound. So if I set this to a hard sync here, what that's going to do is it's always going to restart the oscillator right at the start of the phase. So let's have a listen. I'll set that back to free. Notice that when I play free, every single time I hit a key, it sounds a little bit different. But if I set this to hard, we have a much more consistent tone, and that's what we want. It's much more kind of punchy. Okay, now I might just see what frequencies I'm hitting here. I'm going to open up the EQ again. And now that I've actually... now that I've played around with this pitch envelope, I might just pitch this down just a little bit. This is the sort of thing you might want to actually tune to the song that you're playing in, but I'm aiming for the fundamental to be somewhere around about 100 there. And already we're starting to get something that resembles a kick drum. Now, you could have a much longer decay, or a much shorter decay on the pitch. Again, I'm going to go somewhere around 50. And same thing with the attack and the decay on and the release on the amplitude envelope, on envelope 3. So you get a range of different tones here, either a really fast, punchy kick drum, or more of a like 808-y sort of longer kick drum. So I'm going to go for more of a punchy kick drum here. Okay, now we could just stick with this fundamental tone, which is just a sine wave. However, a big part of, more punchy kind of kick drums is to actually have a bit of distortion. Now, we could actually add distortion directly here inside the ES2. Let's have a listen. I'll turn this up. Now, the overall volume might be getting a bit loud. I might turn the overall volume down a 5 dB or so. All right, so that distortion set to soft. It's more like a saturation. I could set it to hard. All right, so that's giving it a little bit more punch. Now, I am noticing that that is actually, maybe I'll bring the release down a little bit because it's extending out the end of the tail. There we go. So that's sounding okay. Now, I mean, of course, you could try some other distortions out too. If we decide that we don't want to use this distortion, I could turn that down. We could add something like a Logic distortion or an overdrive. I'm just going to open up the overdrive. Let's try this out. And if I turn up the drive a bit, now, any time I turn up the drive, I want to turn the output down because it's making it louder. I'll try and volume match this. All right, so I don't know. Let's try that out compared to this. Fairly similar. All right, now of course there's all sorts of other distortions you could try out. For now, we'll just stick with the one built into the ES2. All right, cool. Now, another part of getting this sort of sound is getting a little bit of more of a transient right at the start. So what I'll do is use a little bit of noise here. Now, you could use all sorts of sounds for this. You could use a sample of something metallic, like a hi-hat or something like that. But I'm going to come here, turn on oscillator 3, and I'm going to switch this to the noise waveform. And I'll actually also move this sort of mixer to just here, oscillator 3, for just a moment. Okay, so we can hear at the moment that's the sound of the noise. And I want to make the noise itself much sort of shorter. So it's just a tiny little tick, like a tiny little transient. And what I might do is see if I can target just the noise. So I'm going to come here and let's maybe do a pitch attack on this, or actually I'll use let's see what we've got here. Could do the pitch number 3. I really wanted to control the amplitude of just this one oscillator, but I'm not sure that we'll be able to do this. So maybe we'll be able to just, here we go. Oscillator 3 level, that's what I want. And I'm going to use another envelope. Let's choose envelope number 2. That's not being used. Here we go, envelope 2, and I'll crank this up. All right, here's envelope 2. I'll turn this release all the way down. All right, it's not short enough for me. Let's see. Surely we can get it shorter than that. Doesn't seem to be having any effect, actually. Let's try something else. I'm going to maybe just try the pitch. Now this also doesn't seem to be working very well. because you can't really pitch noise. I think that's the problem. Luckily, what we've got here is, if I set this to a sine wave here, it's normally set to sine, but there's actually a bunch of other digital tones here. Let's see if I can find something kind of noisy here. I'm after something kind of metallic or noisy, something that's going to just be really kind of like a quick little sound. I wonder what this one is. That's interesting. Not quite what I'm going for. Maybe I can pitch this up. Okay, I'm going to try this one. Instead of the pitch, let's see if I can now set this to the oscillator 3 level. Not having a huge effect. I'll try oscillator 3. What about pitch number 3? Something like that's a bit more what I want. Just a tiny wee tick. Now let's just blend that in with our... Get that even shorter. There we go. On its own doesn't sound like much, but if we blend this in... Blend it in with our main kick drum sound. And maybe we should try some filtering. I'm going to come here to the filter. I'll turn it on to the fat mode. And let's bring down the filter cutoff a bit. Could even play with some filter FM. Okay. Well, that's sounding okay. Let's maybe try and see if we can build this up with some more effects. So I'm going to come here. We already tried an overdrive. Let's see if we can try maybe a different distortion. I'm going to try, say, just Distortion 2. Let's try this out. Got a few different models here. Oh, that's really bringing up a lot of volume there. Not really the tone I'm going for. Let's try something a bit more extreme. Let's try the old bit crusher. This might be way too extreme, but let's try it out. I'll increase the resolution. Increase that drive. Unfortunately, there's no separate volume control here. What I might need to do is add a gain plugin after this. Bring the volume down a bit. Utility gain. There we go. That rap one's sounding quite good. Well, that's adding quite a bit more drive at the start here. We could play with a bit of downsampling maybe. Now I'll leave that down and let's blend this in with the original. Okay, so now we're getting something a little bit more punchy and tough sounding. Of course, we can just EQ this a bit if we wanted to. We could also play with the envelopes now that we've added some effects. So you can hear once it's running through a distortion, it really changes the tone. So coming back and revisiting things sometimes can give you some different results. Okay, let's put this through a compressor. Why not? I'm going to come here to Dynamics, Compressor, and I'm going to set this to auto gain to off. It's, for some reason, it always makes it way too loud. Now, one of the best things about this compressor that I really love is this distortion section. So I'm going to turn on the soft distortion. It's just a simple saturation, but often it kind of gives it a really nice tone. What I also want to do here is maybe have a fairly long attack because I don't want to lose that transient. So I want the initial spike to come through unaltered and then maybe just compress and give a bit more body to the main sort of round tone. So a slow attack will help us do that. I'll really crank this up so we can hear it and we'll maybe back it off later. Okay, let's try some different models of compressor. Not really doing a huge amount. Making it a little bit more punchy maybe. I'll just keep this fairly subtle. Okay, let's maybe try a bit of reverb. This is something that, you know, people don't really often think about with a kick drum, but a kick drum's normally in some sort of a space, so you normally want some sort of reverb in there. Now, very subtle and short is the idea, so I'm going to come here to reverb, and I'm going to just choose maybe a space designer, some good just... First thing I'll do is turn that wet volume way down, and I'll look for some small spaces. I just want some, like a small room or something like that. Let's try some of these out. It's not too bad. I think I quite like that Tom's Room one. Let's try that. Yeah, I'm going to go back and try this one called Tom Room. Let's try that out. Bring that wet down quite a lot. Just supposed to be subtle. Try adding a bit of pre-delay here. Not too much. And I'll come to the output EQ and maybe just take some of the bass out of there because we don't really want heaps of reverb in the bass, or maybe even have a steeper curve. See if that helps. Okay, kind of subtle, but there we go. There's our kick drum sound. So probably a good time to save this. So I'm going to come here and say save as, and I'm going to save it in here. I'll just make a new folder actually. And I'll call this kick 1. And I might even save this whole channel strip. There we go. So obviously there's, a lot of variations on this theme, but hopefully that gives you some ideas to building your own kick drum. I'll check you in the next tutorial.